Will South Sudan's opposition leader Riek Machar change course and sign a power-sharing peace deal? A nation free of corruption and tribalism. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta talks leadership and his legacy. And Africa after Brexit. How British Prime Minister Theresa May plans to boost investment on the continent after Britain leaves the European Union. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. South Sudanese opposition leader Riek Machar has apparently had a change of heart. A Sudanese negotiator says Machar has decided to reverse course and sign the latest draft of a revitalized peace deal to end the country's devastating 5-year-old civil war. Machar had signed the initial draft of a power-sharing deal earlier this month with South Sudanese President Salva Kiir, but refused to sign a revised version this week due to questions over the number of states and their boundaries. But Machar apparently changed his mind and is expected to sign the accord on Thursday after intense discussions with Sudanese negotiators. The new pact will see Machar return from exile in South Africa as the first of the five vice presidents under a transitional government of national unity. The power struggle between President Kiir and Machar, his former deputy, resulted in tens of thousands of South Sudanese being killed after failed peace agreements and millions fleeing their homes. The U.S. military says its forces conducted an airstrike in coordination with Somalia's army that killed 3 al-Shabaab fighters on Wednesday. U.S. Africa Command says no civilians were injured or killed in this airstrike, which occurred approximately 40 kilometers southwest of Mogadishu. Now, across the border, 5 Kenyan soldiers were killed on Wednesday and 10 were wounded when their car ran over a homemade bomb north of the country. A statement from the Kenyan Defense Forces did not say who it believed was responsible for the attack, although it referenced lurking terror elements in the region. Africa 54's Esther Giduyuwa joins me now with more on our interview with Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta. Esther.
Vincent, one of the most devastating attacks from al-Shabaab militants occurred in September 2013 when they attacked the Westgate Mall, killing 71 people and wounding 200 others. Kenyan security officials say the terrorist group is currently using the Boni Forest that cuts across the Kenya-Somalia border as a hideout and base for attacks. In this third and final part of my interview with Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, it's clear the militants still pose a security threat to the entire East Africa region. Mr. President, with regards to Somalia, you had to deal with al-Shabaab militants having attacked Kenya, decimating people, creating a lot of chaos. And there have been some calls within your Kenyan legislators asking that you pull out of Somalia. Is that something that is likely to happen? How is the war against terrorism going on?
Well, like I said, this is even some of the issues that we will be discussing with our American counterparts. We all are hopeful that we shall all be able to pull out of Somalia in the shortest possible time, that we will be able to work together with the federal government of Somalia to be able to strengthen them, that they are able to take care of the security concerns within their own country, and so that we can pull back to our borders and reduce that costs that we are currently bearing and be able to focus that on other more productive areas. So we would be hopeful, and we are constantly encouraging and working with our Somali counterparts, with the AU under the AMISOM umbrella, because Kenya is not the only country that has troops there, working together with various other organizations to help our Somali brothers and sisters to come together and to be able to focus on their own country, bring them together, and eliminate this threat that is a threat not just to Kenya, but is also a threat to the Somali people themselves. So until we are in such a situation, it is impossible for us to say when or the withdrawal date shall be this. The withdrawal date is based on us being able to defeat al-Shabaab, on the Somali people being able to establish strong, solid security structures, a national army, and good administrative structures that will then ensure that they are capable of handling their own affairs. I think that should be the focus, as opposed to when people withdraw, because we can't say we are going to withdraw and leave a vacuum. There must be something to replace that vacuum. And a withdrawal date should be tied towards a scenario where the people of Somalia have themselves been able to establish and to take care of the security concerns in their country, as well as the administrative foundations that they shall need to build a strong and stable Somalia.
I'm wondering, Mr. President, this is your second and last term as President of Kenya. How do you want your legacy to be written?
I want my legacy to be one of bringing our nation and our people together, a nation that will have confidence in its institutions, a nation that will have left corruption and the issues of nepotism and other things that have been a destructive element to our country. I wish to be able to leave Kenya on a foundation that is better and irreversible, and where Kenyans and the international community can have confidence, not in the individual who leads, but in the institutions that we shall create.
Well, Esther, thank you very much. Excellent reporting there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we want to talk a little bit more about some of the things perhaps that didn't come out in the interview. President Kenyatta says he's very, very serious about fighting corruption, but we know that this came out of the handshake, the famous handshake between him and the opposition leader Raila Odinga. Did you explain why now, though?
Well, yes, because he wants to leave a great legacy, as you just heard in the interview. He wants a Kenya. He said he's angry about two things: about Kenya being associated with corruption, and Kenya being associated with violence every 5 years when they go to the polls. That's when Kenyans decide, okay, we are in this tribal cocoon. Those two things really bothers him, and he doesn't want that to go on. Now, with the fight against corruption and the handshake with Raila Odinga, he says he believes 100% that Mr. Odinga is behind him. They are building what they call building bridges, cutting across Kenyan societies to bring cohesion to the country. And with regards to corruption, we've seen a lot, including yesterday, where the Deputy Chief Justice was arrested for a while, released on a 5 million Kenya shillings bond. Her case has been halted for a while, but there have been big fish being arrested for corruption. And the State House has a website, Nairobi State House has a website where they are showing how they are recovering the assets from these corrupt officials. So I think it looks serious. We're going to see in the next couple of years how this turns around, but from the standpoint and from what he told us on the interview, he is 100% serious. He does not want to hear, oh, Kenya, is that the country associated with corruption and psycho-violence? He wants that to be history.
Yes. And then, of course, the issue of development, besides the destruction that was there after the elections, and of course, it was supposed to be followed up by more stable economic development.
He has set up something he is calling the Big Four agenda. And I think these are great things for Kenyans. One of them is food security. He wants food security for all Kenyans. The question of famine in certain parts of the country should be over. So he has set up another agenda, which includes universal health care for Kenyans, as well as manufacturing. He expects that if there's manufacturing, a lot of people will be able to get jobs and put food on the table. And one of the other things is affordable housing. As you know, there are slums in Nairobi, there are slums in other places. With the devastating rain that we saw, the flooding and a lot of houses being washed away, that kind of stuff, he doesn't want to see that. And within this four agenda, there's one thing that kind of struck me, that the president is recognizing women who he calls the trailblazers that are doing well, and this cuts across the age groups, the older women, the younger, anybody coming up with something that is helping the society. Yeah. He wants to recognize those people as well. We've
run out of time, but we know that also there is going to be direct flights from the United States to Kenya in a way of boosting the ties between these two countries.
Beginning
Thank you.
October 28th, exactly. Fully booked by now.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Esther, and we have to say you've done a good job. Excellent reporting there.
Thank you.
Well, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court on Tuesday called on judges to convict a former Congo military leader on charges ranging from murder and rape to conscripting child soldiers and sexual slavery. In closing remarks in the 3-year trial, prosecutor Fatou Bensouda says evidence showed that Bosco Ntaganda personally committed crimes. Ntaganda denies wrongdoing. He faces 18 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity for acts allegedly committed in 2002 to 2003 when he was deputy chief of staff of the Union of Congolese Patriots, a militia group in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Ntaganda's lawyers are expected to respond on Wednesday. No date has been set for a verdict. Now, British Prime Minister Theresa May says the United Kingdom wants to grow trade on the African continent as it prepares to leave the European Union by signing trade agreements with 6 African countries. May, battling to unite her divided Conservative Party over a plan to take Britain out of the European Union, is visiting South Africa, Nigeria and Kenya on her first official trip to the continent. Speaking on Tuesday in South Africa, May said Britain would make more scholarships available for brightest African students to support the continent's talented future leaders and decision. She wants Britain to become the biggest investor in Africa out of the group of 7 nations, overtaking the United States by using the aid budget to help British companies invest on the continent. Now, for more perspective on UK-Africa relations, Mark Napier, Director of Financial Sector Deepening Africa, joins me live via Skype from Nairobi. Good evening, Mr. Napier.
Good evening.
Now, Theresa is saying she wants to boost this trade relationship between Africa and the UK and become perhaps bigger than even the United States and perhaps the European Union. How can she possibly do that?
Well, there's no harm in trying and setting yourself some proper ambitions. I think the reality is that there's a great deal still to go for in Africa, whether you're American, whether you're a UK company. Part of the problem, though, is that the investment environment in Africa is very often suboptimal. And what we need to do collectively is to work together to improve the investment environment that benefits UK companies as well as US companies or anybody else who wants to invest in Africa. And I think what was exciting about what Theresa May was saying is that there's an opportunity in a way to reset the relationship between the sort of larger Western powers and Africa and to put it on the basis of mutual interest. And that, I think, is in many ways what the African countries want to see. They don't want to be patronized, as President Kenyatta was saying in his BBC interview. They want to have the opportunity to trade and to be part of a global family. But in order to do that, you need to have the kind of operating infrastructure in Africa that allows investors to come in and work fruitfully.
Now, let's face it, is the UK trying to catch up with China? You know, China's big in Africa, is big right there in Kenya. What's going on?
Well, not catch up. I think we obviously do things very, very differently. I mean, we don't have the sort of funds that the Chinese government would put to work here. What we do have, though, is an enormous hinterland of financial sector experience, and we can bring that to bear. And my world is about financial sector development in order to encourage the investment to take place. So the vision that I think the Prime Minister was really trying to communicate is to say it's not for governments to step in and provide money. And in reality, that's so not going to happen in the future with governments in many parts of the world, having many other sort of priorities which they need to address. Mm-hmm. It's much cleverer to use the sort of technical expertise that we have with a little bit of capital for sure, but to use the technical expertise that we have to crowd in the private sector, which has far more funding at its disposal than governments could ever hope to put on the table. Now, so it's a different kind of concept, yes, but one I think that is potentially very powerful.
Now, we know Britain has historical ties with some of the African countries, like Kenya, for example. What do you think was missed? What are some of the opportunities missed that an organization like yours may want to bring to the attention of the British government?
Well, a critical issue, of course, is that Africa has a very fast growing and large population. And so if you dial forward 5, 10, 15 years, that's a very large market that if the development trajectory pans out, there are large numbers of people who are going to be coming on grid from an economic sense. And so from a retail banking point of view, that's a great opportunity for retail investors who wanted to get into the retail banking space. But I think what's exciting, a lot of people in the financial sector field at the moment is the technology opportunities or technology-led opportunities. And I think there is an opportunity to bring disruptive innovation to bear in Africa's financial markets, which I think have been dominated for quite some time by incumbents who have perhaps grown used to relatively easy opportunities. And so there is an opportunity with new technology and with good investment support for new providers to come in and really make a difference and do things differently.
Well, Mr. Napier, we appreciate your insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's Mark Napier, who's the Director of Financial Sector Deepening Africa. Well, for years, the U.S. and South Africa have fought over poultry. Washington has kept South African poultry out on health and sanitation grounds, while Pretoria accuses U.S. farmers of dumping chicken at below-cost prices and has imposed tariffs. In 2015, South Africa's powerful poultry industry agreed to exclude 65,000 tons of U.S. chicken from the anti-dumping tariff in return for the renewal of broader duty-free U.S. trade access that benefited other South African industries. Now, as a consequence of his America First trade strategy, President Donald Trump's decision to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum has reignited the poultry clash, threatening nearly $2 billion of South African exports to the United States under Washington's flagship African trade legislation, AGOA.
I would like the South African market and the government to put the import tariffs higher so that for us in the market, the prices can be better. We can't compete with subsidized chickens from overseas, and we can't compare our chickens with theirs. The price difference will kill us. This would level the playing field with the American and overseas markets.
The South African Poultry Association believes that because the US has violated AGOA, it is full within its rights to respond and retaliate. Comes at a very difficult time, especially under President Trump, who has been known to favor a trade war, and we run the risk of possibly being suspended from AGOA ourselves.
Well, a blanket suspension of South Africa's AGOA status would hit the transportation equipment industry hardest. About 85% of its nearly $1.4 billion in exports to the United States were covered by AGOA last year. We'll want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook. So check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Still ahead on Africa 54, the rise of women as professional photojournalists. But first, a look at Wednesday's headlines.
You take some photos and you take your time.
Because, again, under Article 10 of the Constitution, one of the most important
Well, memorial services honoring the late U.S. Senator John McCain begin Wednesday in Arizona, the western state he represented in Congress for more than 30 years. Following a private ceremony inside the rotunda of the Arizona State Capitol in Phoenix, the public will be invited to pay their respects as McCain lies in state. Services will follow the rest of the week in Arizona and Washington, D.C. He died of brain cancer Saturday at the age of 81. McCain is said to be buried Sunday at his alma mater, the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. Excuse me. Now, in the violence-racked Indian-administered state of Kashmir, photojournalists have been capturing the daily lives of people and telling their stories to the outside world for many years. But the work is not without its dangers. 18 journalists and media personnel have been killed covering the 3-decade-old armed conflict in the disputed Himalayan region. Now, the industry is predominantly staffed by men, but that's changing. In recent years, women have stepped up as working photojournalists. VOA's Yusuf Jamil spoke to some of the women who are challenging long-held societal norms and filed this report, narrated by Bizan Hamdad.
Being a journalist in a conflict zone is not an easy job. It's even more difficult if you happen to be a woman. The news media in South Asia, and especially in Indian-administered Kashmir, has traditionally been staffed by men. But a few brave women, including Sana Irshad, are changing the game.
So many things happen in Kashmir. It has a history of violence, and when you think of it, we're living it every day. So nothing is left untouched when it comes to suffering. Kashmir itself is an inspiration to me that I can do something for myself and the people here. And the best medium that I found to achieve this is photography.
But the job comes with significant risks. 18 journalists have been killed in the region since 1989 while covering different events. But Irshad believes that despite the dangers, women can do the work as well as their male colleagues.
When I go out on a shoot, I never think that I'm a girl. When I go out, I'm a professional. I go with the mindset that gender doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is my profession. I've never prioritized my gender over my profession.
I have never prioritized it over my profession. Photojournalist Masrat Zahra agrees. She says with the right support, no amount of societal pressure can hold women back from pursuing their passion.
Girls can make progress in any field but need their parents' support for it. As long as your parents are supporting you, the society will never be able to stop you. Nothing can instill fear in you.
Zahra and Irshad are graduates of Kashmir University's journalism program. Both believe that despite the obstacles they face, women around the world are working hard to collectively break the social boundaries created by a male-dominated society.
It's a message that a woman can do wonders.
For Yusuf Jamil in Srinagar, this is Bizan Hamdad, VOA News.
More than 100 hospitals across the United States are using virtual reality, or VR, as a form of therapy for patients to help manage symptoms such as pain and anxiety. An increasing number of countries worldwide are taking an interest in VR, and doctors are starting to develop international guidelines on how to apply and validate VR in healthcare. VOA's Elizabeth Lee reports from Los Angeles.
Amanda Green lives with pain.
If I don't have nerve pain, I might have joint pain. If I'm not having joint pain, I might have headaches.
The unrelenting pain is a symptom of lupus, an autoimmune disease where a patient's own immune system attacks the body. She participated in a study to see how VR can help with pain.
It worked. It works for me.
VR creates a distraction for her pain, and the content teaches her breathing techniques that also helps.
If it helps with the pain or not.
Brennan Spiegel, a gastroenterologist at Cedars-Sinai, says VR is more than just distraction.
Whoa.
He heads the hospital's virtual reality program.
Abdominal pain, discomfort, GI symptoms in some cases are related to mental state. The brain and the gut are constantly communicating. Something like virtual reality actually can intercede in the brain-gut axis and sort of rewire the neural circuitry in a way that helps to reduce abdominal pain. Virtual reality can reduce pain, can reduce blood pressure, and now we're looking to see can it do really important things like reduce the need for opioids.
But could VR also be addictive?
We have not seen abuse amongst our patients who are using it for therapeutic purposes.
Spiegel is now taking virtual reality outside the hospital to partner clinics such as Attune Health, where many of the patients suffer from joint pain.
We're not just using it as a distraction method, but we are trying to train our patients in deep breathing and biofeedback.
The company Applied VR is developing content to have a VR pharmacy.
You need a wide variety of content because you have a wide variety of people in healthcare. You have from infancy to geriatrics.
The aim is for patients to learn in virtual reality how to use their minds to manage pain and reproduce these skills in the real world. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News, Los Angeles.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. A new mobile phone app is helping direct Maasai cattle herders in Kenya to find rich pastures and water in their drought-stricken terrain. AfriScout is helping direct herdsmen towards rich pasture and water and away from carnivorous animals and other danger zones. The satellite imagery generated on the app gives a clear view of what the vegetation cover is, including current surface water points. There are more than 225 million pastoralists across Africa, where 43% of landmass is pastoral, and livestock production accounts for 10 to 44% of the GDP in African countries. That's according to Project Concern International, the US-based non-profit organization that designed the app. Meanwhile, in other tech news, tech giant Amazon has released a child-friendly version of its smart assistant robot, Alexa. Now Amazon is targeting the kids market with its new free time feature for its smart voice-activated assistant. When free time is activated, Alexa answers sensitive questions differently. For example, if a youngster asks where babies come from, Alexa's kid version tells them to ask a grown-up. Amazon says it worked with child psychologists for some of Alexa's answers, and that the voice assistant is always getting smarter with updated answers, and that's what's trending today. Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. This expression sounds like a violent way of eating, but it's actually not always about eating.
Here is your Russian book, Anna. Thanks for letting me borrow it.
Oh, are you done with level 1 already?
Yeah, I finished last week, and I've already finished level 2.
Wow, you are really sinking your teeth into learning Russian.